tuning in to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us. You know, when we think about improving problems on farms, it's a whole different discussion if we're talking about ground that you own versus ground that you're renting. Well, one of the big problems on rented ground that really takes a little thought is how do we get drainage tile installed on rented ground? We'll discuss that on today's program.
Last week on the show, we talked about the 3-pre approach for soybeans. If you don't get those 3 sites of action out there, you could have a difficult time controlling weeds. Well, what happens if for some reason you're not able to get those 3 pre's out? What's option 2? We want to discuss that today.
Well, we may need a couple of options, a couple good options for our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop this weed later in the show. But first, here's today's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about how farmers store grain for a long period of time and how the moisture has to be just right.
Well, okay, we're in a cornfield here, and this corn was harvested. The moisture content was somewhere in the neighborhood of 20% moisture. When you put 20% moisture corn into a bin, it's going to store safely for, what, a few days? Maybe. Not very long.
Well, it all depends on the temperature. So there are a lot of things you could get into there, but here's Darren's point. We want to store our corn between 13 and 15% moisture, somewhere in there, and then it's usually pretty safe. The other thing that we're talking about in addition to moisture is the temperature. We'd like to have the temperature down somewhere between 35 and 45 degrees to store over the course of the wintertime and through the spring.
Okay, so when we think about that, let's go back to that corn example. Corn comes out of the field at 20, but we're going to put it into the bins at 13 to 15%. How does that happen? Well, what farmers are going to do is they're going to actually dry that corn. Now, not every farm is set up with a corn dryer, but many farms are, especially guys that have been raising corn for a long time. The challenge is they may not have enough bins, so they're probably going to have to take some of it to town, and the grain elevators in town that are going to buy the corn from farmers definitely have the capabilities of drying that grain so they can control their storage conditions. But let's just take the example of our farm. So we'll harvest this corn, we'll haul it back to our home grain bin site, and we've got corn dryers there that Brian likes to stay up all night during the fall. It's just one of his fun things that he gets to do on the farm and watch these dryers. So how much fun is that, Brian?
Well, it's a lot more fun now that we have good systems on there. So we put this system on from AgriDry that allows me to monitor our dryers remotely. I really like being able to control things remotely and just see where everything is at. The other thing that we can do is control fans. So there are 2 ways that you're going to dry this grain down. 1, you're putting air on it, and 2, you're putting heat on it. Okay, so we're going to put a lot of heat on the grain. In the case of corn, it's going to be 200, 210 degree heat that we're going to throw at that. So that does cost some money. We heat ours with propane. But if you want to just slowly dry that grain down, you can do it by controlling fans. That's the other thing with that AgriDry system I can do. I've got that system on several different fans on bins. So if I had a bin of corn that was 18% moisture, that fan could kick on when the humidity is right and when the air temperature is right. So very slowly over a long period of time, we could take the moisture out of the grain. But the main thing here is we've got to get the moisture down, and we want to keep the temperature down too, so the grain stores. We get worried about mold, we get worried about other diseases in there. We also do get worried about insects. And by keeping the humidity down, the moisture down, the temperature down, we're in pretty good shape in both regards for insects and especially for diseases.
All right, we also raise a lot of soybeans on our farm, and sometimes those soybeans will be a little too wet. For long-term storage of soybeans, you want the moisture percentage to be at the most 13%, but likely a point or 2 less than that, so you don't have to worry about those issues like mold and insects. When we were in Brazil a few years back, it was interesting. I mean, you're in Mato Grosso. We were just out way away from anything. And so the farms had to be pretty self-sufficient. And one farm we visited had a large wood-burning dryer for their soybeans. So they would bring wood in, keep this dryer going, and try to take moisture out of the beans. Now they're in a little different situation where we farm in the upper Midwest. Soybeans will dry down naturally out in the field. You can wait and the soybeans will be the right moisture percentage. You can get them harvested pretty much no problem 99% of the time. In Brazil, they get rain all the time, and they were taking soybeans out of the field around 20% moisture and then having to dry 7 points of moisture out of those beans to be able to store them, sell them, ship them, really any kind of handling after that point. So they had to dry beans every year. And that was just one of the things that went into play for them, where we don't fight that on our farm here.
The other side of this moisture thing is we don't want the grain too dry. If it's too dry, then in effect, we're not able to sell as many pounds to anyone that we are selling it to, the grain elevator, the terminal, whatever it is. So with these systems that we put on our grain bin fans, we actually can pump a little humidity back into the grain. You can't legally put water onto the grain. You can't go and spray water on your grain. But with humid air, you can pump the humid air in, and so if you run the fans at the right time of day when the humidity is just right, you can put a little moisture back in. And sometimes we'll get soybeans down to 8 or 9%. We want to bump that moisture percentage back up to the 11 to 13% range.
Well, moisture content in grain is very important, whether you're talking about corn, soybeans, or other crops. So farmers will try to harvest at the right moisture percentage if at all possible, but when conditions go against them, farmers may have to either use heat or use air to try and take that excess moisture out of the grain.
Having the right moisture is important if a farmer is going to be profitable, but so is weed control. We'll tell you how to stop our weed of the week coming up later in the show.
What's next in weed control technology? Roundup Ready 2 Extend soybeans will provide tolerance to dicamba and glyphosate and will be built on the Genuity Roundup Ready to Yield tray. See them in action at extendfollowafield.com.
Dirty work pays. That is if your dirty work includes a SoilMax Gold Digger tile plow. SoilMax tile plows feature zero deflection technology. With the only tile plow factory paired with Ag Leader's IntelliSlope control system, you eliminate the need for grade calculations and lasers. So make your next investment in a SoilMax Gold Digger. Better yield, longer planting and harvest windows, better water management is all yours with SoilMax. Visit soilmax.com.
Stop coring your bins with the AgriDry Gravity Grain Spreader. Traditional bin filling systems create uneven concentrations of grain and fine particulates. Uniform grain distribution allows even airflow throughout the entire bin, giving you more control over temperature and moisture content, increasing your grain quality and bottom line. Call us today for more information.
Dry Load Store, 1-855 AgriDry.
For lower cost, higher production, Mandaco Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Twister's ease of maintenance is forgiving and rocks and has contour conformity equaling zero downtime. Our hydraulically adjusted coulter angles make residue management easier, less costly. Spring or fall, the Mandaco Twister vertical tillage unit is the new leader. See your Mandaco Agri dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call.
Working in agriculture over the past 3 decades, I saw a need for an accurate way to apply dry product to seed. That's where our Changing Times applicators come in. The CT applicator brush sifts powder into small particles, resulting in proper distribution. Quantities can be adjusted by the speed of the brush rotation. This allows for even and accurate distribution of product. Application at the time of planting can be used with any seed delivery system and saves farmers time, labor, and money. Remember, CT applicators for the Changing Times.
A proven herbicide for decades, dicamba can provide burn-down residual control of tough and resistant weeds for up to 14 days. That's another reason why farmers will use dicamba for years to come. Brought to you by Roundup Ready Plus Weed Management Solutions.
If you have Roundup resistant weeds on your farm, yet you continue to plant Roundup Ready soybeans, then you're probably looking at, okay, what are my other options and what happens if I don't get my good pre-program on? We talked last week about how we really want you to use 3 pre's. That would include one of the yellows, metribuzin, and a PPO like Valor Authority. Okay, that's great. We hope that you do that. But unfortunately, we realize sometimes Mother Nature prevents you from getting all the herbicides applied when you want. Well, the problem with all those pre's in soybeans, they can't be used early post. You have to use something else early post. So we want to talk about what we would call option 2 today.
Well, in the Mid-South, the recommendation you'll hear from the universities is a good one. They'll say use your pre-emerge herbicides and get them on and get them activated before you seed the crop. In reality though, a lot of guys, well, wow, when the soil conditions are fit, they just want to seed and then put the herbicides on later. But if your beans pop right out of the ground, like happened this year, especially in many areas that were planting a little bit late, we had beans out of the ground, within just a few days of planting, you don't have much time to get those others on. That's why option 2 comes into play. We've got herbicides that give residual control, but yet they're safe to apply post-emerge in the crop.
All right, the products we're talking about here would include Warrant, Dual, Outlook, Zidua. Those products are group 15 herbicides. They do not have contact activity, but they do have good residual control. They actually all can be used on corn and soybeans, but the problem is in soybeans, we're going to want you to use a little bit lower rate. It's lower rates that are labeled. So don't expect the same performance you'd get in corn when you use them pre-emerge in your soybeans post-emerge. But what we do want to talk about today is, okay, Outlook, there isn't going to be a tremendous supply going into this next year. Zidua, not a tremendous supply. So what options do we even have left? Warrant is probably number 1. That's the least expensive option. It's 3 pints per acre, and after rebate, you're probably talking $6 is all. So that's not a bad way to go. Then you also have Anthem, which is a combination of Zidua and Cadet. Cadet does have contact activity. The Zidua, like I said earlier, does not. But that combination of Anthem for the low rate, the 4-ounce rate, you're going to be talking around $10 an acre.
So option 2 isn't like it's free, and some people will say, well, I don't like option 1 using your 3 soil residual herbicides.
$12 to $20 an acre.
Yeah, it's going to cost me some money. But I look at it again this way. Option 1 is option 1 for a reason. That's what you really want to do. And is it worth 2 to 2.5 bushels of soybeans? Absolutely, you're going to get excellent weed control. But if your beans start popping up and you can't get those herbicides on before those beans come out of the ground, hey, that's what option 2 is for. So you don't say, well, man, I guess I just will disc the soybeans under. I really don't like that option. I'd much rather go with one of these option 2s. Now, the key is to get them out sooner rather than later. Yep. We get a lot of questions about, well, does this go on with my first shot of Roundup, with my second shot of Roundup? Definitely it goes on with your first shot of Roundup. And if you didn't get a pre-down, you're going to need to make that first shot of Roundup a little earlier than you otherwise would. It may be just 2 or 3 weeks after planting and you're already back out there with Roundup and adding those residuals on. The other thing you may say is, you know what, I've got a heavy weed pressure issue out here. I'm going to get those residuals on fast, even though my beans are really short. I just got to get them on, and you may just have to pull the trigger and do that.
Now, the one thing we want to caution you on, you are going to see a little bit of crop response, and I don't care which one of these option 2 herbicides you're using. For that matter, anything other than Roundup or Liberty on Roundup or Liberty soybeans, anything else is probably going to burn the beans at least a little bit. And obviously there are varying degrees here. So Warrant, Anthem, you're going to see a little bit of leaf cupping. It's really no big deal. The beans are going to come right out of it. And especially when you spray really early, you're usually in pretty good shape. No long-term damage or anything like that.
All right, here's the other thing, Brent. Option 2, guys will say, well, can I mix that with my fungicide application? Can I mix it with other herbicides?
Yes, you can, but here's the thing. Everything else you throw in that tank is going to probably add a little bit more leaf burn. And especially if you were to go with a foliar fertilizer, you're probably not going to use foliar fertilizer that early anyway. But we'd really caution you there. Hey, I'd maybe spray just a few acres, see how it looks before you spray everything. So be real careful with what your tank mix partners are. Talk to a good agronomist about whatever you want to do.
All right, let's talk about weed control then from those option 2 herbicides. What are we mainly looking at? Obviously, we're going to get some grass control out of the group 15s. That's a nice thing. But how about the tough ones like Roundup resistant Palmer pigweed and
pigweed, lamb's quarters? Those are the main things, pigweed and lamb's quarters. But in addition to that, yeah, you might have a little bit of suppression on ragweed and some of the other ones. The main thing is that we've got at least something else out there for the pigweed. Between the water hemp and Palmer pigweed, that's probably the #1 family that we have resistance issues with across the country.
Well, if you've got some that are up, you'll definitely get some activity out of the Cadet in the Anthem, so that might be the way you want to go.
And if you do that early, you still have other options you can come back with later. I guess we're just trying to say this is a good way to go to get some residual, do it real early in the season. You still have other choices to go ahead and spray later on when you have more weeds come back, but at least this gives you a pretty good start, especially if you didn't get the 3 pre-on.
Well, it's good to have lots of options available to you in terms of weed control on soybeans, especially if you have our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grit sampling today. keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
My data is mine, not mined.
Mine to share.
Mine to keep.
It's mine when I want it.
Mine where I want it.
And only mine. My data is mine to analyze.
Mine to put to work.
Mine to control. It's mine.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
Looking to maximize yield? QuickRoots is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. QuickRoots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more. QuickRoots is applied to the seeds so the live microorganisms go right to work, enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients, including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your local dealer and get your QuickRoots today.
I wish I could side dress more than just nitrogen.
You can. While side dressing is efficient for nitrogen applications, you can also use that opportunity to apply PK and the micronutrients your crop needs. AgroLiquid's Calibrate and MicroLink products allow you to nutritionally balance your side dress application efficiently and economically. Let Agriculture Liquid Fertilizer help you make your next crop a bumper crop. For more info, visit agroliquid.com.
It's a humble idea. Use a biological process to turn a plant into a power source. From that idea came the first Poet refinery. One biorefinery in one town turned into 27 facilities in 27 towns, creating new local jobs, producing hundreds of millions of gallons of ethanol, and providing renewable products around the world. Suddenly, that one little idea seems a whole lot bigger. See the world differently with Poet.
Darren and I often get the question from farmers, hey, I understand that tile really pays, but how do I talk my landlord into tiling his ground? How do I work with the landlord?
Well, there's lots of different rental situations, whether it's just cash rent, whether it's a long-term cash rent or a year-to-year cash rent, whether you're sharecropping. I mean, just a number of different situations you may find yourself in. But either way, when you want to make a long-term change to the ground, it's something you definitely have to work with your landlord on. And also, to be able to afford it, you need to have some sort of security there that you're going to be farming that ground for a while, unless the landlord's willing to foot the whole bill.
Okay, well, the big thing here is that you approach the landlord and make sure they understand, number one, we've got some drainage issues out in the field. Number two, that when we put tile in the field, it's going to improve the land. It's actually going to improve the environment too. And besides that, it's going to make your ground more valuable. Plus, I'm willing to pay you more, or anybody's willing to pay you more for cash rent going forward because that ground is tiled, because we as farmers can raise a better crop.
And one of the questions that we get is, how quickly will this tile start to make a difference on my ground? Because landlords are interested in, is this something that's going to be right away kind of thing? And in almost all soils, you're going to see something just immediately happening out in your field. If you've got excess water and that water starts to leave, it's going to improve things. Now, if you're bone dry, obviously that tile's not going to do anything.
It still made a difference, okay? So in almost all cases, tile's gonna make the difference. And as a farmer, you already know that, all right? We're not telling you anything you don't know. But what we are talking about here is, how do you convince the landlord that I should be doing this? All right, there are two approaches that we've done on our farm and that we talk to farmers about. Number one is, you say, okay, if you're willing to invest an extra, whatever it is, let's call it $20,000 to tile your land, then I'm willing to pay 10% of that in immediate rental increase. So if it was $20,000, 10% of that is $2,000, so we immediately raise the rent by $2,000. For some landlords, they're not gonna like that approach. We'll get to option two here in just a second. But anyway, the first choice is, I'd have the landlord pay for everything. I'd just increase my cash rent. That way I have nothing out of pocket. I have no extra risk. I don't have to have a long-term contract, nothing else. I just have the landlord invest the money. I raise the rent. Okay, and how I pitch the landlord is, this is a 10% return on your money. Chances are you got money that's sitting in the bank right now making a 0.5%. Why not get a 10% return? Oh, and by the way, when you invest that $20,000 in your land just went up in value at least $20,000. Look at any tiled land around, it always sells for more than untiled land. Okay, so that's option one. Option two is, I would pay for all the tile, 100%. I'd do everything. And I tell the landlord, look, I realize you don't maybe have the cash to do this. I'm willing to pay for all the tile. We'll put it in. I just want a long-term fixed rent lease. And as long as I get that, then I have a certain number of years, and I vary that. It might be 3 years, it might be 6 years, it might be 10 years that I want that rental contract for, depending on how many dollars I had to invest in the ground and how quickly I think I can get that back. So those are really the two options. We've worked both of those with great success, and it just depends on how you pitch your landlord on this thing. All I can tell you is it's such a good thing for the ground, and once the landlord sees it, we rarely have any landlord, well, we've never had any landlord that said, oh, I wish we wouldn't have done that. They all say, wow, that was great. Now we're getting more yield, the ground looks better, everything is in a lot better shape.
Well, there are certainly a lot of different situations that may come up out there, but two general situations are the landlord that's on a fixed income and the landlord that wants to invest some money. Either way, tiling rented ground pays, and there are ways to work it out with almost any landlord.
Well, the other thing you've got to work out with your landlords is making sure his or her fields are clean all the time in terms of weed control. We'll talk about controlling our weed of the week coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Farming isn't just in the land, it's in you. Take control of weeds like never before. Enlist builds on the Roundup Ready system, combining proven control of a new 2,4-D and glyphosate in Enlist Duo herbicide. Protect what matters without changing the way you farm. Talk to your seed or crop protection supplier today.
Our weed of the week is toothed spurge.
You know, there's always an unusual weed that you just haven't seen before, and all of a sudden, hey, I got a spot out in this field that has this strange weed out there. I got that call probably 10 or 15 years ago with the first time I ever came across toothed spurge.
I think it's longer ago than that now, Darren.
Well, I don't want to admit many more years than 10 or 15, Brian, but still, back to when I first saw toothed spurge, the farmer said, man, I got this weed, and when I break the stem, it's full of milk. And so we started thinking of all the weeds that had milk in them, and most of the ones we were thinking about were things like leafy spurge, dandelion. We've got perennial weeds. Toothed spurge, however, is just an annual. When you look at the weed, it's got toothed edges on the outside of the leaves. It's not thorny or prickly that way, just serrated edges on the outside of the leaves. That's how it got the name toothed spurge. And as far as control goes, a lot of the contact killers that have pretty good burn do a nice job. For example, starting out pre-emerge in mini crops, you can use Sharpen or Sharpen premixes. Things like Verdict in corn, things like Optil in soybeans can definitely be used to wipe out toothed spurge early. Post-emerge is where it gets a little more tricky because some of the products do okay, and some of them are not quite as good. In corn, I really like Buctril, especially when you mix atrazine with it, or when you increase the rate to the highest end of the labeled rate of Buctril. In wheat, I really like Husky, especially at the strong rate, because Husky contains some Buctril as well. In soybeans, there aren't as many good choices. With soybeans, I really like Roundup Ready soybeans or Liberty Link soybeans. That gives you the best option. Other products that could be used would be things like Flex Star, Cadet, and Cobra.
Well, Roundup isn't fantastic on toothed spurge, so the key is if you're going to spray Roundup that you spray it when that toothed spurge is very small. And again, there are certainly some tank mix partners and pre-emerge herbicides you can use. Well, that's it for our Weed of the Week, toothed spurge, but stay tuned, Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
You probably have plenty of shop work already this winter, but I want to add one more thing to your list. In today's Iron Talk, we're going to talk about sprayer nozzle bodies. One of the most important things on your sprayer is a 3-way, or better yet, 5-way nozzle body. If your sprayer doesn't have this type of nozzle body, we highly recommend you bring your sprayer into the shop this winter and make this simple modification. The reason why it's so important to have the right spray nozzle is not just drift reduction, it's also control. For example, did you know that fungicides only move upward in plants? Since they move in the xylem rather than the phloem, they can't move down. That means that unless you thoroughly cover the lower leaves of the plant, those leaves can still have disease issues. For that matter, if any leaf isn't totally covered, disease may still affect portions of that leaf. So if you've ever used a fungicide and you say, man, I'm not getting as good a result as someone else, chances are it could be the spray tip that you're using, and it's a real simple fix. With a 3-way or 5-way nozzle body, it will literally take a minute or two to switch spray tips all the way across your spray boom so you have exactly the right nozzle for windy days or calm days, big droplets or small droplets, high volume or low. And as new herbicides come onto the market with dicamba and 2,4-D tolerant crops here over the next couple of years, this is going to be even more important for herbicides as well. So bring the sprayer into the shop this winter and get those 3- or 5-way nozzle bodies put on. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show. It's easy to stay busy on your farm over the winter, hauling grain, getting ready for next spring, or a host of other jobs that always seem pressing. However, if you want to make 2015 your best year ever, it's important to invest some of your time learning. I invite you to spend at least one day attending a free Ag PhD workshop. We have a new format, new information, and more tips to help you improve your yield and, most importantly, your profits. Go to agphd.com and register today.
Wake up, breakfast is served. Your roots crave pea. Most of your applied pea gets tied up in the soil, a natural phenomenon known as phosphorus fixation. Fix the problem with Avail Phosphorus Fertilizer Enhancer. Avail makes more pea available to your roots, here, here, and here. Increasing pea availability can lead to increased pea uptake in the plant. That's more pea, and more pea. More phosphorus for your crop can mean more results in your bin. An average of 9.6 bushels per acre of corn. Breakfast is served. Supercharge your pea with Avail.
How will you secure your farm for the future? The Quasar Chopping Cornhead from Capello USA will help. Our design is focused on efficiency, longevity, and reducing harvest loss, making the Quasar the corn harvest solution to bring your farm forward. With hundreds of units ready for immediate delivery, secure your farm's future today. Do it for your farm, do it for them. Order now. Capello USA, Italian craftsmanship, American grit.
We know that the future is liquid. That's how Agriculture Liquid Fertilizer creates the highest quality products on the market. Because we're committed to finding the best raw materials at the best price possible and getting them from us to you in the most sustainable, responsible ways possible. Agriculture Liquid Fertilizers, helping you grow the future.
No one understands your farm, your field, and your soil like you. I'm Myron Stein, and at Stein Seed Company, we know your field demands a choice. That's why Stein's corn breeding program combines our industry-leading genetics and superior standability with the most sought-after traits, giving you the best choices for maximum yield. Learn more about Stein's hybrid lineup by visiting steinseed.com or contacting your local Stein Seed dealer.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
On your farm, you need speed and year-round effectiveness in your tillage program. The Quick Till from Norwood Sales allows you to move quickly through your fields, maximizing time and improving yield. Constructed of heavy-duty materials, the Quick Till is ideal for both spring and fall applications, from preparing a healthy seedbed early in the season to breaking up corn residue after harvest. For more information about how a Quick Till can improve fields on your farm, call Norwood Sales today.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's show, but if you're looking for more agronomic information, we invite you to tune in to the Ag PhD radio show. It's a live call-in show. You can call us at 844-44-AG-PhD any weekday. We're doing the show at 2 p.m. Central. It's a 1-hour daily show on Sirius XM Channel 80.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show, where we'll have another Weed of the Week, Iron Talk, Farm Basics, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
What's so sweet about manure? Animals eating prairie grass and returning nutrients to the soil through manure is the way nature is intended to work. To learn more about manure and how farmers use it to raise crops, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.